Before we begin the day's proceedings, I would like to go through some very quick housekeeping issues. First, I would like to kindly ask you, out of respect, to either switch off your phones or turn them into silent mode. And if you require any assistance in terms of bathrooms, please speak to our colleagues that are stationed at the door right outside this building. And before we begin, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of some dignitaries and also colleagues who have traveled from far for this memorial service. First, may I acknowledge the presence of our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Loretta Ferris. A very good morning to you and welcome. Second, I'd like to also acknowledge the presence of the UN Independent Expert on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, Mr. Graham Reed. You are most welcome. I'd also like to acknowledge colleagues that have traveled from far for this particular event, namely Crispin Sivande, who was one of Charles's doctoral students. He has come all the way from Lilongwe in Malawi, as well as Professor Serge Kamga, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Law at the University of the Free State. Welcome, colleagues. We are gathered here today to remember and to celebrate the exceptional life and work of Professor Charles Ngwena, a beloved husband, father, grandfather, colleague, mentor, and friend. Charles, as he was affectionately known to those close to him, touched so many lives across the globe, not just through his distinguished scholarship and skilled mentorship, but through his exceptional kindness and humanity. Many of us here will agree that Charles truly embodied the spirit of Ubuntu. The length and breadth of Charles's influence and impact will become clear as we listen to the lineup of family members, friends, and colleagues who will speak to us this morning. But before I introduce our first speaker, I would like to invite the Assistant Director of the Center for Human Rights, Mr. Lloyd Kuvea, who will read a passage of scripture for us. Immediately after that, I will invite us all to stand and sing the hymn, Amazing Grace, together. You will find the words of this hymn at the back of your programs. Thank you, Mr. Kuvea.
A very good morning to you all. Our Bible reading this morning, as we celebrate the life and work of Professor Charles Ngwena, is taken from the book of 2 Timothy, chapter 4, verse 7. I'll read in your hearing. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Henceforth, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at that day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. May the Lord bless the reading of the word. Thank you.
Thank you all. At this juncture, I would like to invite our first speaker to the podium, who is a member of the Charles Ngwena family, Sekuru Molai. Sekuru Molai, you're most welcome.
This is Blessing Ngwena. He is the late Charles' nephew. He will just say a few words and then I'll finish
up. Good morning to you all. I would like to thank you for coming today to witness the memorial of my father, Professor Charles Ngwena. I've been sent to say just a few words coming from the heart of the Ngwena families. We thank you for supporting and being with us today. As the Ngwena families, we want to say, go well, Mr. Charles. You have given us a good platform, and also we will be with you in our spirits, and we will always be you will always be in our hearts. Thank you so much.
You must make this automatically adjust for some of us here who are short. Don't leave it for your guests to be lifting and, you know. Anyway, good morning. Distinguished guests, esteemed professors, colleagues, friends and family, all protocols observed. Kosi, Gideon and Rosemary, I didn't travel to South Africa to attend the funeral, but I ended up buying this pair of black jeans for this somber moment. So you will have to reimburse me for this. Folks, I do not wear suits or jacket and tie after a 25-year uninterrupted stint in a bank in Zimbabwe, so excuse me. I stand before you today on such a somber occasion with a heart both heavy with grief and full of profound gratitude, as I have been granted the honor to pay tribute to a remarkable man, my cousin, Professor Charles Ngwena. We are gathered to remember not just my cousin Charles Ngwena, a professor of law, but an amazing person. To me, he was a confidant and a bouncing board. We were paternal cousins by blood, but friends by choice. For those who are curious about the relationship, he was my first cousin once removed, to be precise. I have volumes of memories with or of Charles. I'll miss him with all my heart. So do I mourn Charles twice, as a family member and as a friend? I don't know. Charles was more than just a brilliant academic, a respected professor and an intellectual giant. To us, his family, he was the embodiment of humility, warmth and unwavering support. While his scholarly work left an indelible mark on human rights law, etc., it is the depth of his character, his kindness and his quiet strength that will carry in our hearts forever. Growing up, Charles was a beacon, not because he sought the spotlight, but because his light was impossible to ignore. His journey from our humble beginnings in Zimbabwe to the esteemed halls of the University of Swaziland, now Eswatini, where he met someone, I forgot her name, or his hidden names, of a program coordinator at the Department of Demography and Statistics. Then to Orange Free State, where he set his base, through Yale University to Oxford to University of Pretoria and beyond. That was a testament to his resilience, dedication, and unyielding belief in enhancing the quest for knowledge of mostly young people and underscoring justice and equality. But beyond his academic accolades, Charles remained deeply rooted in the values that shaped him: integrity, compassion, and an enduring commitment to the dignity of every human being. We grew up together, me and him, in Marondera, a small town in Zimbabwe. Then the pursuit of education as well as excellence in life took us on separate paths. I attended universities in Canada, and he went to the UK, starting off in London and ending up at University of Wales, now Cardiff University, where one of his daughters has just graduated from. Despite being in 2 different continents and different time zones, we never lost our bond. Every summer, I would visit him in the UK. Even as a student, Charles made room for me I'll say it. Charles made room for me and my girlfriend by temporarily moving out of his nurse's home student accommodation. He would grab a sleeping bag and crash at a friend's place so we could be comfortable. That was Charles, generous, thoughtful, and always putting others first. We shared a love for the music of Oliver Mtukudzi and Thomas Mapfumo, playing songs like Ndimanda Pedza, which speaks to having fought the good fight that was being referred to, finishing the race, and now we have no doubt that he will get the deserved crown from the Creator, a fitting tribute to Charles' life. Admittedly, Charles wasn't much of a dancer, 2 left feet and all, but he had good taste in music, but of course I was ahead of him. Charles fought the good fight, lived with compassion, and left behind a legacy of service and excellence. His contributions to academia and human rights advocacy were profound. He wasn't just a scholar, an advocate for those on the margins, and a mentor to countless students whose lives he touched. Yet for us, his family, his greatest legacy is personal. It's in the memories we shared, the laughter at family gatherings, the thoughtful conversations, his quiet wisdom in moments of doubt, and his unwavering presence in times of need. Charles taught us that true greatness lies not in titles or achievements, but in how we treat others with dignity, respect, and love. It's not my place to be giving or saying the vote of thanks, but allow me to pay tribute to someone I said I had forgotten a name. Earlier in my speech, to whom we will always be grateful for. That's the final story, because as the Bible reminds us in John 2, verse 11, sometimes the best is saved for last. Everyone saves the good wine first, and then when people have drunk freely and a lot, they save an inferior wine, but for Charles, the Lord had saved the best for last. Actually, it reminds me of Charles playing a song from Thomas Mapfumo called Kariba, where he talks about a journey from Harare to Kariba, in this case, Eswatini, in this case, where he met this lovely woman, Patricia Dudu. Oh, that's a name, sorry, now I know. That's the name of that program coordinator in the Department of Demography and Statistics that loved, saved the best for. Remember I said we had our time in the UK. Dudu, thanks for being there for your partner 24/7, 365. When the medical physicians had thrown in the towel, Charles always had an impeccable taste, and he proved it when he met you, his Florence Nightingale, the lady with a lamp who changed his life. Your love and care gave Charles dignity and comfort in his final days. For that, Dudu, our prayer warrior, we are forever grateful. 2 Chronicles 15:7 says, "But as for you, be strong and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded." We love you back. As I close, I want to express my thanks in as many languages as possible. Ke a leboga thata bagaetsho, ngiyabonga, zikomo, ndinotenda, gracias, obrigado. In Eswatini, what do you say? Ndiyabulela kakhulu. Is that correct? Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Bye, Danki. Finally, may his memory be a blessing. Rest in peace, dear cousin. Your work here is done, but your spirit will continue to guide us. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sekuru Mulai, for those heartwarming words about Charles. It was nice for us as his colleagues and his students to hear about his younger days, but we were not surprised to hear that he was back then just as warm as we knew him to be. As we commence the tribute session of our program, I would like to invite Professor Andre, and he will be speaking on behalf of the current Dean, Professor Elso Biskuman, who unfortunately could not join us today due to circumstances beyond her control. Professor Bering.
Good morning, everyone. All protocol observed. As indicated by the chairperson, I stand here on behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Law, who unfortunately cannot be present, Charles Ngwena, a distinguished scholar, educator, and advocate for human rights. As the former dean and a long-time colleague, I had the privilege of working alongside him and amongst others attending the opening ceremonies of his disability rights programs, a course very close to my heart as well. With deep sorrow, we mourn the loss of Professor Ngwena, whose impact on human rights law, disability rights, and sexual and reproductive rights was profound. A dedicated academic, he was internationally renowned, yet deeply committed to Africa, ensuring his work advanced justice and equality across the continent. But it must also be said that Professor Ngwena's intellectual rigor was matched by his humility. At the University of the Free State, he joined the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria in 2012, shaping its focus on disability and sexual and reproductive rights. His leadership established the Masters in Sexual and Reproductive Rights in Africa and the Disability Rights in Africa program. These are lasting testaments to his vision. Beyond academia, he advised various organizations, including the South African National AIDS Council, and was recently appointed to the Advisory Committee for Project 148, working on domesticating the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in South Africa. His contributions have left an indelible mark on disability law and policy. As convening editor of the African Disability Rights Yearbook, he amplified scholarship in the field. His mentorship and dedication inspired countless students, academics, and practitioners who will remember him, not just for his brilliance, but for his patience and his warmth. Our Dean, Professor Elsabe Skuman, asked me to share her message in his honor, and it reads as follows. On behalf of the faculty, I extend our sincere condolences to Professor Ngwena's family, friends, and close colleagues. We share in your grief, and we want you to know that you are in our thoughts and prayers. When I first met Professor Ngwena, I was immediately struck by his humility and his compassionate and gracious interaction with colleagues and students. An intellectual giant and internationally acclaimed scholar, Professor Ngwena very generously shared his knowledge and expertise, as well as his unique insights with colleagues and students. This generosity of spirit has ensured that his legacy will endure through generations to come. He also contributed greatly to his community, as well as the continent and globally, as is evidenced by the numerous bodies and institutions he advised and served on. His monumental work, What is Africanness?, will forever stand as a beacon of scholarly prowess. Professor Ngwena and his scholarship were one. He lived and breathed human rights. As we mourn his loss, we also celebrate and honor his legacy. Now, in preparation for this tribute this morning, I also looked through social media, and I saw quite a string of messages coming from students, colleagues across the board, and I had to decide which one to read out, to include in my tribute this morning. And I picked the one of a former student, Dr. Puleng Letse, who wrote, "We have lost a great, humble, brilliant, and knowledgeable giant, mentor and leader whose mantra was to empower others. With such dedication, gentleness, and humility. Rest in peace, Prof. Ngwena. You were more than my supervisor, but also a mentor and great supporter of our advocacy for human rights." And then I've also picked up a message by Professor Sandra Liebenberg, the well-known Oppenheimer Chair in Human Rights Law at the University of Stellenbosch. She posted this note: "What a tremendous loss to South African scholarship. Condolences to his family, close friends, and colleagues. He was such a stellar scholar and also mentor to many emerging academics. He will be sorely missed. So finally, as we bid for farewell, we celebrate his extraordinary legacy in law, human rights and education. Professor Charles Ngwena, we salute you. Rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Borain, for also reminding us of how many lives Professor Ngwena touched through his scholarship and also through his own personality and his humanity. Next, I would like to invite our acting director at the Center for Human Rights, Professor Nkatha Murungi, to deliver her tribute to Charles. Professor Murungi.
To the family, friends, colleagues, my sincere condolences once again. The tone that has been set here is already, I think, paying a tribute to Charles in who he was, a big name, a huge intellectual, someone we all looked up to. And my reflections this morning are at a personal level, but also as coming from the Center for Human Rights. I met Charles at the start of my doctoral studies at the University of the Western Cape. It was around the year 2011, and I was researching on disability rights, and at the time, there were not many African researchers working in the rights of persons with disabilities. It was a period soon after the adoption of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And it was very early in the conversations around whether we should have an African protocol on the rights of persons with disabilities. And Charles became a huge resource for me at that time, both through his research, but especially through direct commentary on my work during the short course on the rights of persons with disabilities, as well as the Disability Rights in Africa conference, which was just beginning at the time, and subsequently through various interactions we had at conferences and events here at the University of Pretoria. Through these interactions, Charles knew of my knowledge, he grew my knowledge profoundly, and he affirmed my scholarship. And through my interactions with him, I began to feel comfortable in the scholarship around disability rights, and I began to look forward to our meetings at the regular forums as an opportunity to tap into his wealth of knowledge, especially on how to navigate complex and difficult contestations in the disability field. Charles was a credible voice and a citizen of the disability community, and he lent this credibility to emerging scholars without reservation. For those who may know, the disability rights field is a field in which, even as you research, it's also important to have a certain kind of citizenship to be able to navigate some of the local politics that happen internally. And Charles was a huge resource for me in this regard. Then, through these continued interactions, Charles got to know of my interest in sexual and reproductive health and rights. And then he began to invite me to events and discussions on women's rights and sexual and reproductive health rights. This drew me into the sexual and reproductive health rights field, and the regular opportunities that he provided. At the time I was working in an NGO in a different sector. Those opportunities sustained my interest and grew my capacity. And Charles' mentorship, is needless to say, was always gentle but firm. Charles hardly criticized, but instead he provided alternative ways of thinking about issues which would naturally lead someone to reconsider their position. And I found this refreshing and always collegial. He was so polite that he would never tell you to your face that you're wrong, but he would make you realize you're wrong. by just explaining the matter in a different way. Charles was happy for me when I joined the center on a full-time basis nearly 7 years ago, and I found myself once again in need of his guidance. I had re-entered academia from the NGO world with very lofty goals of re-establishing myself as an academic and rebuilding scholarship. And Charles was happy for me, but in a fatherly way, also warned me of the challenges of the busy schedule of the center without challenging my aspirations. And of course, he was right. I was a bit naive about how much I can achieve while also pursuing the full programs of what the assistant directorship at the time provided. Nevertheless, he supported me all the way. And unfortunately, my return coincided with the time when Charles was in a bit of poor health, and so our interactions were a bit limited. And then COVID happened, and the isolation became even more pronounced. And while we met a few times thereafter, when he came for events and to meet his students, during which time he would stay at the guest house on Murray Street, he eventually left for Galway and later for Yale, and from then we only communicated virtually. As the center, Charles was a valuable colleague. He was incredibly resourceful. And for those of us who had the privilege of working closely with him, we may have been lucky to catch his dry humor here and there. It's for these reasons that even in his retirement, we asked Charles to continue working with us. And in the post-retirement period, he taught, he supervised, he researched, he mentored, he contributed meaningfully to our work until the very end. And I mean until the very end, because even in the week that Charles passed, he was still sending emails to his students. He brought on a sharp mind, a deep intellect, an incredible collegiality, and above all, the most respectful manner you would ever wish for in a colleague. For the intellectual giant that he was, Charles was incredible. He was largely the brain behind the center's work on race and common citizenship, including a unit and a short course on the subject, the brain behind the Sexual and Reproductive Rights in Africa Masters, which, through his guidance and contributions, subsequently grew into a doctoral and postdoctoral program, and in more recent years has become a body of research and programmatic interventions, including litigation on matters of sexual and reproductive rights across the continent. He was also the brain behind the establishment of the Disability Rights in Africa program, as well as the Disability Rights Unit at the Center for Human Rights, which now advances the work that he bore on the advancement of the Advanced Short Course in Disability Rights in Africa, the Disability Rights in Africa Master's Program, the doctoral and postdoctoral disability programs, as well as the African Disability Rights Yearbook. As you will have noticed, these are the same themes that run through Charles' seminal book, What is Africanness? Contesting Nativism, Race, Culture, and Sexualities. Charles brought his various connections and networks into accessed financial and intellectual resources to support and carry forward the work that he cared deeply about. Charles' death is a deep loss for the center, but we are comforted by his bigger-than-life legacy. He will continue to speak in the human rights field for many years to come. We were incredibly lucky to have him as one of us for the many years that he stayed with us. And at this moment, and on behalf of the Center for Human Rights, I just want to thank you, Patricia, and his family more broadly, for allowing us the privilege to work with Charles for as long as we did, because we know that it often took him away from you. And we hope that you find today to be a befitting tribute to him from us, May his gentle soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you so much, Professor Murungi. I think, as we all know, Charles's work took him beyond the borders of the African continent to places like Europe and North America. And now, to speak more about the work that he did, particularly in the United Kingdom, I would like to invite Professor Kate O'Regan, who is the director of the Bonavero Institute of Human Rights at the University of Oxford. She is also a former justice of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and Charles spent some time teaching at the summer school there in Oxford. Professor O'Regan will be joining us virtually via Zoom as she's unable to make it physically.
Good morning. Thank you very much indeed for giving me this opportunity to speak. I'm very sorry that I can't join you in person, but we're in the middle of term time here in Oxford. It's with great sadness that we heard of the death of Professor Ngwena earlier this week. Professor Ngwena has been a core member of the faculty on the summer school that is run here in the University of Oxford, jointly with the George Washington University School of Law every summer. This summer school draws together faculty from across the globe, including many of the esteemed colleagues from the University of Pretoria, including Professor Ngwena. Professor Ngwena was his recent monograph that several of the speakers before me have mentioned, What is Africanist? Contesting Nativism in Race, Cultural and Sexuality, is a profound and lasting contribution to an important scholarship which will long outlast him. Professor Ngwena, as many people have said, wore his brilliant and his
is on mute, we can't hear you.
While thinking not only about pushing the science and the law, but also about decolonizing these concepts at the same time.
Would that he had had better health and more time to advance this work. In closing, we send our heartfelt sympathies to Patricia, his family, and all of you gathered to honor Charles today. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for that heartwarming message from colleagues at Yale Law School in the United States of America. At this juncture, I would like to invite to the podium Professor Serge Kamga, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Law State. As you probably already know, Charles worked at the University of the Free State prior to joining the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. And so he's worked with Prof. Serge for quite some time. Prof. Serge, you're most welcome to deliver your tribute. Thank you.
You know, there is just so much to say about Professor Charles. But I would like to start by thanking the Center for Human Rights and the University of Pretoria for putting this event together here. And I will also use the opportunity to thank particularly Professor Frans Filion for the phone calls and his comforting words when we had the sad news. And also thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. As I bring my condolences from the University of the Free State, where Prof. Charles worked for a very long time before moving to the University of Pretoria, I will also share some personal experience, just perhaps to say Prof. Charles was a mentor, a friend, a family man, and a great man. Well, I was very honored and privileged to meet Prof. Charles Ngwena in 2011 at a roundtable on disability rights organized by the Center for Human Rights. It was the center and OSISA. We were at the time discussing a project, the disability right in law schools in Southern Africa. At the time, Prof. Charles was still at the University of the Free State, which is my home today. But after the meeting, we kept in touch. Then, under the project, together with Prof. France, Professor Hélène Combring, Professor Ilse Duplessis, we established the African Disability Rights Yearbook with Prof. Ngwena as the convening editor. In fact, given that I was still doing my baby steps on disability rights, I was originally an assistant editor on the journal, but in the process, Professor Ngwena, he kind of trained me, he coached me, he taught me how to research on disability rights. Every time I will go for a conference, he will read the abstract and correct it before I go. He will read my papers before I send it out for publications. So he was always there to groom me, and as a mentor. And of course, I did not have any other expectation besides being an assistant editor. But one day he came here, he was in Brooklyn, and I went to see him, and he said, Serge, you are doing a great work for the yearbook. You are actually more than an assistant editor. I will discuss this with you. Then fast forward, after their discussion, I was promoted to become an editor of the journal. Until today, even though I am a dean, I still work for the journal, and I was still working together and discussing things with Prof. Charles, who was the convening editor. In fact, he made sure that I could deliver on my commitments on the journal, even though, and he will, when you say you are busy, he will calmly bring you to understand that you are committed to this task and you should do it. By the time you do it, you are happy to do it. Because I don't want to be too lengthy, I will move as a friend. As a friend, every time Prof. Charles Ngwena was in Pretoria with Mama Patricia or alone, we will have dinner either in my house or at a restaurant. And they will come home with gifts for the children. In fact, Prof. Charles, he fondly called the boys, my boss, the Chelsea teams. And every time they will see him, they say, the father of the Chelsea teams is coming. And Mama Patricia called my wife my princess. So the family, the friendship was quite profound. So I will tell you now how from becoming friends, we became family, and I learned something. Before his trip to the USA, when Prof. Charles was ill and admitted at the hospital in Bloemfontein, and I was still at UNISA at the time, I flew to see him at the hospital. When it was time to leave, I wanted to help. And I would call it a mistake because I had an envelope, of course it was money, to support, because I saw the amount of medication and things that were done on his body. But he said, no, Serge, don't do that. Do not do that. And I was embarrassed. Then he said, you can get me some fruit, but no money, because we are family. In family, the money, just for you to come and see me means a lot. You do not need to give me any money. And I then went to the shop and I bought some fruit, which I came and I flew back. But very interestingly, when I had some COVID-related health challenges, Prof. Charles and Mama Patricia ordered and paid for some medication to be delivered at my home. Just look at. Then when I called to say thank you, they say, no, we are family. You don't need to thank us. He was a great man. After his passing, so many friends and colleagues in the disability rights sector sent me emails and messages. And I want to share one or two with you, or three. At the UFS, Prof. De Frita said, it is with much sadness a scholar and gentleman who was involved with the faculty is no more. Then Kanya Motabi said, this is a terrible shock. Just this past year, we spent time with him at our Disability Rights Conference at which he spoke. Indeed, although unwell, he gave a keynote address online from the US when we launched the Disability Rights Unit at the Faculty of Law at the University of the Free State. And my office manager, who knows him very well, Mrs. Lombard, said, I will always cherish the memory of him as a true gentleman whose kindness and dignity left a lasting impression. Prof. Titi Chataika, that many of us here know, sent me and said, I'm hurt. In spite of his health challenges, his presence was key for the disability rights sector. Professor Hélène Combry, that I referred to earlier, sent me this small note that I want to share with you. Such a sad day today. I learned about Prof. Charles passing earlier this morning, and I've been teary-eyed ever since. He really was a giant, not only on disability rights, but so many other fields as well. One of the things I admired most about him and patience, when it came to working with new authors, researching one word on Mama Patricia Ngwena. Because before they left to the US, from time to time, I would pay them a visit in Bloemfontein. With Prof. Charles was his very powerful wife, Mama Patricia. She was always by his side. Her faith in God was invincible. She had become an expert in the condition that Prof. Charles was suffering. She became an expert. You could not give water to Charles without Mama Patricia checking on Google whether he should drink that water. Nothing will go through whoever you are, and she will advise, she will say, no, you cannot touch this, no, now it's time to go out for a walk, you must drop your oxygen. You know, it was incredible. Then she will be doing this, and there was never a dull moment with her, always brave, with a big smile. You won't even realize that there is a problem. I think she fought with him every day. Mama Patricia, you fought the right fight. You gave everything you could to keep our Prof alive. But as a strong Christian that I know you are, this was the will of God. And all I will say is that now Prof. Charles is gone, but he will never be forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Serge. We will now play a pre-recorded message from Professor Rebecca Cook. Professor Cook is a Professor Emerita and Co-Director of International Reproductive and Sexual Health Law Program at the Faculty of Law, University of Toronto in Canada. Thank you.
I so regret not being able to join you in person to celebrate the life of Charles Ngwena and to give you hugs of condolences, especially to Patricia and her family, and to congratulate you all on all that you have done to make the Pretoria Human Rights Center the vibrant place that it is, and Charles's academic home that facilitated so much of his work, and now, sadly, the memorial to his life. My husband, Bernard Dickens, and I were very fortunate to meet Charles in 2000 in Helsinki at the conference of the World Association of Medical Law. He was then viewed to be, throughout his life, a scholar and a gentleman to the core, with his eyes clearly on the horizon. We reached out to collaborate with him, and within a year, we were co-authoring an article and continued to form many academic collaborations. He taught at the University of Toronto Faculty of Law as a visiting professor, and I taught at the law faculty of the University of Free State and then at the University of Pretoria Human Rights Center. Charles's scholarship was exceptionally rigorous, accepting nothing short of excellence. It was characterized by his vision, his compassion, and his courage. It was grounded in a profound understanding of the realities of the most vulnerable. It was inspirational and, yes, sometimes intimidating to write with him. With his mixture of pragmatism, humanity, and understanding of how law and life could be harmfully raced and gendered. His open, progressive mind enabled the ideas to flow, and his fine sensitivity to language allowed those ideas to be articulated in accessible ways in many articles, chapters, and even books. As a colleague, his work ethic was exceptionally disciplined and respectful of others, always responding in a timely fashion, meeting deadlines, thus characterizing him as a finisher. For all these qualities and more, he was highly sought after for his advice and counsel, such as by the World Health Organization, for his membership on its scientific and ethical review group of its human reproduction program, for his editorial skills by the International Journal of Gynecology, for his co-editorship of its ethical and legal section. While his sad departure leaves us with heavy hearts, we must remember how fortunate we have been to have had him in our lives, with his affirming friendship and collegiality, and to know that his legacy as a first-rate scholar and a gentle gentleman will continue to illuminate our understanding of what it means to be human. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Help. If you want to be taken seriously as a scholar, you can't resume at 9 and close at 5. You have to put extra hours. And then he went on to say, if you want people to take you seriously, you should abide that attitude that there's no closing time for an academic unless the job is done. No closing time for an academic unless the work is done. That was very profound and also stuck with me forever in terms of how I also took my work, with him. The second one has to do with his humility. His humility really humbled me. If you work with Professor Ngwena, he's such a very humble person. He will not go about, boasting or parroting about his achievement. He once told me, look, curiosity. He was very kind, very, very kind and generous to a fault. With his resources, with his knowledge, and with his time. Whenever I wrote something, I would send it to him then, and then he would find time, despite his very busy schedule, to comment on it. And of course, I also asked for references, and other people asking for references. He taught me that, look, don't ever, delay writing references to your student or colleague. That could change their lives. So you must take it seriously about writing reference for people. I also learned that from him, and I thought it's a very important message he was passing across. So he was really, really very kind in terms of his time and knowledge. He will share his knowledge, he will share his expertise, and we all know that about him. So that's also a very profound thing I also learned from him. He was a great team player. As a student, whenever he's organizing a meeting or anything, he will call me in for a meeting, sit down, what do you think about it, what to do, that. And of course, when he came to the center also, and he invited me to teach on the program, whenever he's designing anything, he will also ask for my opinion. He always took people's opinion very seriously. He will never look down on you, whether you're a student or not. I think I found it very, very empowering in that sense, So I think he was a great man in all that he did. I learned a lot from him, and of course, we should give glory to God for his life well spent. No doubt about it. He made very good impact, profound impact in his area of life, in his career, and we should be grateful. And in our situation, the Bible said us that we should be thankful for God, and we should be thankful for the life of Professor Charles Ngwena. Now, people have said it. I also thank Mayor Patricia for the work well done, and I pray that God will give you the fortitude to bear this irreparable loss. To Kosi, to Claudia, to Gideon, I pray that you will hold on to the promise of God, that I will not leave you nor forsake you. Professor Charles Ngwena came, he saw, and he conquered. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Professor Durajai, for those nice words, inspiring words about Professor Charles. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng to deliver her tribute to Professor Charles. Dr. Mofokeng, who is joining us virtually via Zoom, is the UN Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Thank you.
Thank you so much for including me in this memorial service for Professor Charles Ngwena, who initially was a professor, which, as we all know, we are very fearful of our professors as young people, but very quickly became a colleague and a friend. And my particular relationship with Prof became really important in how he was so supportive, questions that I had at the time, but I think it was so important to do that with him and to recognize that he was able to create that space for intellectual work to happen, but also fostering a really deep sense of responsibility as one takes on these big roles and tasks around the world. And as we've heard today, with the outpouring of tributes and messages of gratitude for him from across the world, he really has built a phenomenal and a formidable community of colleagues, but also human rights defenders. I remember sharing with Prof early on the idea that I wanted to position healthcare workers and the understanding of the practice of medicine as a powerful tool to defend human rights. And, it was through the discussions around not just equity or equality of outcomes when it comes to the right to health, but substantive equality and what that meant. And I'm so proud to say that, Prof lives through at least the reports and the work that I do at the United Nations. He has been an amazing teacher and an amazing ally that if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would be as bold and as clear and as methodological as I am, and also so defiant in my own activism. Prof was very gentle and very steady, but he was undeniable as an activist, as someone who's committed through and through. And I think he really did support that fire that many of us as his mentees had, and gave us really the tools to go out into the world to be able to effect the change. And we know of Mom Patricia, and we send you our condolences and our love and deepest gratitude for the times and the moments that you afforded us to have with Prof. And there are no words magnificent enough to ease all of your heartache. And we know that the times ahead with grief will still be tough, but know that with so many people that Prof supported, that Prof mentored, that he continues to live not only in us as people, in our values, in our outlook in life, but also in the work that we will do, and that his impact truly has gone the world over. And as someone who can email Prof, could call Prof, and he would very quickly answer and return your calls, it feels insurmountable. It feels unreal, and that void, is so real for so many of us. And I think it's that. The reflection of how deeply connected that we still were with Prof, and we will miss him dearly. And I say this to all of my siblings, all of the mentees that Prof had, that all of us, many of us have become dear friends as well, that we commit to doing the work, we commit in the same ethic of work that Prof has left us, that he modeled for us, and that the shade of the baobab may be gone, but the roots remain within all of us. Sleep well, our beloved Professor Charles. We will deeply always love you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Dr. Mofokeng for that moving tribute to Charles.
Process of headhunting Charles away, Professor Sach, from the University of the Free State. But just as we thought after a number of years that the courtship was eventually concluded, Patricia is the one who dug in her heels. She let us know that she would not be part of any resettlement to any Pretoria. And that then led to an impending deal derailment, which was then averted by what I would call an early pre-COVID work from home, the home being Bloemfontein, experiment. But honestly, this experiment, I think, was always going to be a resounding success, given the dedication, the dependability of the guinea pig, Charles. We all heard about his work ethic, and my experience, certainly, it was a work ethic that was beyond even the possibility of reproach. To the center, Charles's arrival here was like a shot in the arm. It bolstered our capacity in the substantive rights domain in which we have just at that time embarked. He took the center's fledgling work, as we heard, in the rights of persons with disabilities to higher heights. It was his vision and leadership that contributed greatly to establish the center's annual Disability Rights Conference, which started in 2013 and became a landmark on the African human rights calendar. And it certainly was his inspirational editorial acumen that was indispensable to making the African Disability Rights Yearbook now being recognized as a unique source of knowledge generation on Africa, by Africans and for Africa. Charles was not just an academic, but he could actually also be very practical. He brought with him, as you heard, the whole concept curriculum from the University of Free State for our master's program in sexual and reproductive rights, and also came with the complete support of donors who assisted us in putting in place that program that now enters its 11th year. One of his most significant legacies is, I think, what I count to be the 9 students who completed their doctoral theses under his supervision. He was masterful at finding the right balance between being rigorous in its constructive criticism, but also being a mentor and a lifelong cheerleader for these persons he mentored. Now, apart from our colleague Ebenezer, who just spoke, who graduated under his supervision in the University of the Free State, and Godwin Odo and Paul Juma, all the other doctoral candidates who graduated under him were female students. I would like to mention their names: Ume Nguze, Anwuli Ofwani, Satang Nabane will speak just now, Rudo Chigudu, Willeen Holness, and our program director, Diana Msipa. They are all young female scholars, and I think that they have all already started to blaze their own trails. I think we can rightly talk about these doctoral candidates. We should add the many master students and others that I think are already benefiting from him, had benefited as students, and will continue on their journeys. Charles was intuitive in his empathy, and this characteristic made him an activist and a socially engaged academic. His choice of research topics was always purposive, always exploring the position of those rendered marginalized, othered, and excluded. And he never shied away from controversy, giving intellectual leadership on issues such as abortion as a human right and on gender-affirming care. His thoughtfulness and provocation is nowhere better displayed than in his masterpiece that had been mentioned many times before, What is Africanness?, which received, we should also remember, the Vice-Chancellor's Award for Scholarly Books at the university here. Charles was a wordsmith, a master of the measured phrase, but he used these words and phrases in the service of what really mattered to him, aimed at making our world a more moral place. This image lingers in my mind. Like a great sportsman at the peak of their powers, they always say these sportsmen are then in the zone when they perform optimally. I see Charles, the careful craftsman at work, captivating and inspiring an audience of students or others, whether it is in the center's classroom or at the Bonavera Institute in Oxford last year, with all his moral earnestness and clearly articulated and compelling, eloquent erudition. I count myself, like many others, very fortunate indeed that I have had Charles as a colleague and as a friend. I admired him deeply, as many others mentioned, as a deeply moral person, someone with the greatest integrity, humility, and generosity of spirit. For us at the center, Charles allowed us, through his impact on our programs and on us as people, to attain more closely the ambition that the center has of embodying in equal measure excellence and humanity, Ubuntu. Indeed, it is a dark day and we are sad, but I think we are reassured that Charles's spirit will be the light that will shine in our lives as we go from here henceforth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Viljoen. And now to close the colleagues and mentees tribute section of the program, if you can call it that, I would like to invite Dr. Satang Nabane, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Human Rights, as well as the Director of Programs at the Human Rights Center at the University of Dayton in the United States of America. Dr. Nabane will be joining us virtually via Zoom. Dr. Nabane.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to share a few reflections on my journey with Professor Charles Ngwena, a man whose influence on my life and career is truly immeasurable. My first encounter with Prof was in 2012, when as a fresh HRDA master's student, I did there to suggest a gap in his already extensive research on the Maputo Protocol, particularly around the issue of safe abortion. At that point, I did expect a dismissal or perhaps even a gentle reprimand. Instead, he engaged with my challenge, offering critical insights and suggesting avenues for further research. That moment in 2012 defined our relationship, one of mutual respect and intellectual generosity. He never made me feel small, as many people have already indicated. Every interaction was marked by his smile and genuine interest in things that I was doing. Our connection deepened when I received a doctoral scholarship through the Political Determinants of Sexual and Reproductive Health in Africa project at the Center, from the Center for Law and Social Transformation, Law Transform at the University of Bergen, which Professor Ngwena has engaged in, especially with the yearly Bergen exchanges. Alongside Professor Siri Gloppen, Prof became my supervisor. These two academic giants shaped me, pushing me beyond my limits. I did remember, though, back in 2016, 2017, quite a lot of people did express their concern and were worried for me when they learned that Prof was my supervisor. I think what those well-meaning people didn't see was the other side of him. Yes, he was demanding, but also, as many has already indicated, he was incredibly supportive, absolutely motivating. He was able to offer guidance, answer questions, and provide encouragement. He celebrated my successes, big or small. He was one of the first people that will send a congratulatory email or a message when I publish something, whether it's a blog or a publication itself. And I think for me, at the very early stages of our relationship, I knew he genuinely wanted me to succeed. He did create an environment where I felt challenged, yet nurtured. A good example is when I struggled with the theoretical chapter of my dissertation. So I was doing, trying to, at the very beginning, showcasing the very shortcomings of Foucault's concept of power, right? Especially from an African perspective. However, he did point out the need for a balanced perspective. He said, and I quote, because I went back to the draft dissertations and the draft chapter where he made a comment, and he said, and I quote, "It is not your aim to throw out the baby with the bathwater," end quote. I think for me, it was really around this idea of how he was teaching me thinking and diverse perspectives as well. Our collaboration extended beyond my dissertation to the postdoc, but also particularly working on the sexual and reproductive rights in Africa program at the center, which I later managed. He entrusted me with significant responsibilities, and he generously shared his expertise, even including templates for exam and dissertation. So when I was first had contacts from external universities about examining mini dissertations, I reached out and he quickly sent a template, really emphasizing and recognizing the importance of supporting emerging scholars as well. And as I said, he consistently championed my work and that of all the emerging scholars, many of whom, especially over this weekend, Thabita, Ade, and so many others who express the same sentiment as well. I think for me as well, Prof also encouraged me to broaden my intellectual horizon through the many colloquiums that we organized together. Recently, not so recent, but in 2020 and 2021, when I conceived the colloquium on FGM, he urged me to look beyond just the traditional human rights discourse to explore the complexities of criminalization and its intersection with sexual and reproductive health. He wanted us to spark a real conversation, and we did. This advice led to a highly engaging and thought-provoking colloquium. And though we were to co-edit the forthcoming book project on the politics of criminalization on FGM, he told me that I was ready to shepherd it alone, and he was at hand for support anytime. Prof, as indicated by others as well, facilitated so many opportunities at the center and beyond for us to contribute to important policy dialogues, including our work with their sister Dr. T, who just spoke. Through the work of our doctoral student, Kerry Go, as well, we were able to into some of her reports, extending our reach and impact. I think for me, one of the highlights of my relationship and my career was the Ngwena conference that we organized in 2023 with so many at the center, including Rutendo, celebrating his legacy. Even in this celebration of his contributions, he graciously agreed to have my book launch. I remember jokingly saying to him later that I was his second favorite after Ebenezer, to which he replied, quote, "You are also my favorite, Satan," end quote. Our dear Mama Patricia, one of the strongest women I know, then chimed in saying, "It was all in one household, though she might have said that I am number one." She then said, though they missed the book launch, that they were fully present in spirit, showering me with love and pride. This encapsulates the kind of supportive and intellectually stimulating environment he cultivated. He later generously joined the North American launch of the book center. Just wanted to conclude by saying that Prof. Ngwena taught me to not only to be a rigorous scholar, but also to be a generous mentor and a thoughtful and ethical advocate for social justice. He instilled in me and so many others the importance of challenging assumptions, pushing boundaries, and always striving to make a difference. He's like so many others for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nabane, for your moving tribute to Professor Charles. So I think to this point, we have heard a lot about Charles the scholar, Charles the mentor, and Charles the colleague, but that's just one side of who he was. As we all know, Charles was a devoted family man, and the remainder of our program is reserved for Charles's family members. And I now have the singular pleasure of inviting the Charles Family Choir to sing us a song. Thank you. Thank you so much to the family choir for that very beautiful singing. At this stage, I'd like to invite Charles's grandchildren, Owami and Kanyezi, who will be reading their letter to Grandpa. You're welcome to come to the front if you're comfortable.
Good morning, everyone. So we're here to share a few words in honor of our grandfather. So let me get started. I can hardly find the right words to express the depth of my sorrow, so I figured I'd start off with one of our favorite memories with Grandpa. How lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard? A quote from one of my favorite childhood books, Winnie the Pooh. During our school holidays, Grandpa read bedtime stories to us every night we were at home, specifically the Winnie the Pooh book. Now, we've read this book with Grandpa several times. However, every time he read it to us, it felt like I'd never read the book before. He had a magnificent way of bringing each character to life, which never made it a bore. I'll miss eating Grandpa's delicious sadza, one of his favorite Zimbabwean meals, and listening to his childhood stories. I found it ironic how Grandpa, someone I considered ancient, taught me how to use my very first laptop. Isn't it supposed to be the other way around? I look forward to hearing different stories different countries Grandpa visited after his work trips. Speaking to him was like talking to a human encyclopedia. When Grandma and Grandpa moved to the US, we introduced the tradition of having our weekly Sunday call, and during our calls we'd discuss school, our future aspirations, issues around the globe, and when we'd finally see each other again. This week would have been my first time seeing Grandpa again since he left for the US in 2022. But unfortunately, I never got the opportunity because Grandpa had sadly passed on just 2 days after his arrival. It breaks our hearts that we'll never be able to see or hear from Grandpa again. And I feel like there's so much more I could have learned from him. However, I am grateful I was able to experience my grandfather's love. My grandpa taught me so much, not just through his words, but through the way he lived. He showed us the importance of education, respect, and hard work, as well as integrity. While we grieve Grandpa's absence, I'd also like to celebrate the incredible life he lived and the impact he left on us and many others, as well as the values he instilled in us. Lastly, Grandpa, if you can hear me where you are, I'd like to thank you for everything. Your kindness, your wisdom, and your unwavering love. I'll carry you in my heart for as long as I can, and I hope someday we can be together again. Rest in eternal peace, Grandpa. We love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It is now time for our eulogy, which will be delivered by Kosi, Gideon, and Claudia. Thereafter, Professor Graham Duncan will pronounce the blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Professor Charles Ngwena, ba to us, was compassionate, he was a remarkable scholar, a towering intellectual whose profound impact on the world of human rights will be forever remembered. We've heard much about Ba as a scholar today, and as a mentor and a friend to all his students. His dedication was unmatched, and I'm so proud of how he supervised so many master's and doctoral students, as well as postgraduate fellows, all of whom were enriched by his wisdom, his patience, and his commitment to excellence. He was a pillar of guidance and support, and all of us, all of those who were fortunate to work alongside him, will always remember how deeply he cared for their success and their well-being. His support extended well beyond the classroom. He actively participated in numerous initiatives at the center, including work on race and common citizenship, as well as collaborations with the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health. Beyond his intellectual brilliance, what truly made Ba stand out was his kindness, his humility and generosity. Ba was a gentleman in all manner and form. He valued every individual equally and treated everyone he met with respect, dignity, and compassion. He never hesitated to offer his time and wisdom to those who sought his guidance. His unwavering belief in the inherent worth of others, combined with his warm and engaging spirit, made him such a beloved colleague, friend, father, and grandfather. At the heart of Ba's life was his family. His love for his best friend, Mom, Patricia, and his children was boundless. He is survived by his loving wife, Patricia, his 3 children, Corsi, Gideon, and me, Claudia Rose, and his 2 beloved grandchildren, Kanyezi and Oami. A teacher at heart, Ba, you introduced us to authors like Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, countless bedtime stories, and now we have your own extensive published work. You introduced us to all of that at a young age, and you planted the seeds of wisdom that have grown with us. Now, as adults, we revisit these books and the conversations, the memories we had with you, and we find new meaning in them. Thank you for sharing your love for literature and the lessons that continue to guide us. Your legacy will live on in the lives of everyone you touched, the ideas you advanced, and the values you instilled in those who had the privilege of working and knowing you. As we celebrate your life, one of passion and a dedication to justice, we carry forth the lessons that you taught us and the wisdom that you shared. Ba, you'll be sorely missed, but your legacy will endure forever. And you rest in eternal peace. Thank you, guys.
Please bear with me for just a moment because I want to do a little more than pronounce a blessing. 2 scriptures came to mind in preparing for this service. And the first was how Charles epitomized in his life the qualities that God requires of us. And we find this summarized beautifully in the prophecy of Micah. And there we read, "What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." I think that's what most of the comments given today have expressed in more detail. But I also want to offer a word of comfort for the family, which comes from another prophet, the prophet Isaiah. And Isaiah says, "Arise, shine, For your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is shining on you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Your sun shall no more go down, everlasting light, and your days of mourning will come to an end. Let us pray. God, source of life, beyond knowledge and thought, mysterious and profound, we give thanks because we have seen you in Charles, who has died. We give thanks for your life in him with all its achievements, and for your love given and received by him among family and friends. We give thanks for all the memories that have been shared today, which will continue to guide us as we move forward. And we give thanks that Charles was such a person that our sorrow now is real and our loss great, for he was one who enriched us by his presence. Help us to see through his death, to see more deeply into the meaning of his life and our own lives, and to grasp more firmly the hope that life is longer than our years and the love you have shown us in him stronger than death. And as we honor Charles, we pray for ourselves, because death disturbs us deeply and raises unanswerable questions for us. Death cannot be escaped. We cannot hide from it or hold it away from us. It comes, and we are compelled to face it. But we pray that we may not be overwhelmed or embittered by Charles' death, that it may not cause us to think less of life, but more, that it may not turn us in on ourselves in self-pity, but will make us more eager to comfort others in any sorrow of theirs. We pray for Patricia, for Kosi, for Gideon and Claudia, for Owami and Kanyesi. And we pray for each person here or further afield whose lives have been touched by Charles's passing. And as we honor Charles, we commit ourselves for his name's sake to live for each other and to make life not only bearable, but joyful and triumphant for all who struggle and are afraid. Lord, give us all we need for rejoicing, all we need for hope and peace. Be with us here and everywhere. Be present for us now and always, fulfiller of our past, strength of our present, and promise of our future, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us all stand. Now let us go on our way in the strength of God. He is with us and he goes before us, our confidence, our courage, and our hope, now and forever. We remain standing for the hymn.
You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of the formal part of Professor Charles Ngwena's memorial service. From all we have seen and heard today, I do not think it is an exaggeration to say that Charles was an exceptional person who immensely impacted his family, colleagues, and the field of international human rights law broadly. He leaves behind an impressive legacy. Though he is gone, and we will miss him dearly, Charles will never be forgotten and will continue to live on in all of our hearts. May his soul rest in peace. May I invite you all to join us for refreshments. These will be served on the second floor of the Faculty of Law building, right where the entrance to the Center for Human Rights is. If you do not know where that is, we have colleagues stationed at the door who will be able to direct you accordingly. Thank you.